Welcome to Echo, the podcast where we share our personal perspectives on questions about God, spirituality, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm Ryan Becker, your host. No matter who you are, we hope that you find value and encouragement through real discussions about real things. Let's jump in. Echo.
This episode of the Echo Podcast is sponsored by Southern Adventist University.
Welcome to Echo, the podcast where we talk about faith and life questions that young adults are facing. I'm Ryan Becker, the host, and I'm joined today by two great human beings that I have a ton of respect for. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we'll start with Joe.
Hi, my name is Joe Pieretti. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm a pastor.
Sweet. And Beth, what about you?
Beth Grissom. I live here in Charlotte, and I'm do women's ministries.
Sweet. Awesome. So this one is a touchy one for a lot of believers across the spectrum. This is something, today's topic is one that traditionally church has not been known for handling well. And in recent years, I think we, Christianity in general, have come under fire for good reason. All of the times that scandals and things have been brushed under the rug, or we just move someone from one place to the other to avoid something. I think we're in a place now where I'm actually very grateful for social media for this reason. I think social media is actually causing this is my personal opinion, but I think it's causing a revolution in the church similar to, or not revolution, a reformation in the church. I'm sorry, a reformation in the idea being that social media has given voice back to the everyday person and member. And so we're able to hold people accountable, whether it's institutions or pastors, churches, you name it. We're able to hold them accountable for the things that they do in a way that is now, they can't hide it as easily anymore. Now, there's the flip side of that where we go too far and mob mentality can be a bad thing, absolutely. But we're also seeing with things like the Me Too movement or the Church Too movement, we're seeing justice take a new form in our church and kind of a renewed form in the church because of that. And so I want to speak life into these issues in a way that hopefully can be constructive in saying, like, when a scandal breaks, when a leader is caught in something abusive or something terrible or a secret sin, whatever it is, it fractures the community. You start to realize that someone's sin doesn't just impact them, it impacts everyone around them, regardless of what level of authority they have. Your sins affect your friends, even if you're not in a position of authority, or your family. So, I want to talk not from the perspective of someone who is seeing abuse in front of them or scandal in front of them, but I really want to speak to the experience of someone whose faith gets shaken by these kind of things. How do we navigate these times where leaders that we trusted or institutions that we trusted are revealed to be either wolves in sheep's clothing or people that we should never have trusted or people that, may have lost our trust, right? So I think the first question I would ask in that is, why do we think the church has such an issue in this area where, we're looking at evangelical Christianity across the board is now having issues with pastor after pastor after pastor, or Catholicism has had it too, and Adventism hasn't been clean either.
Right.
Of leaders who have abused their power in multiple ways. Why do you think the church has such an issue in this area? Or do you think it's really not a spotlight on the church, but it's just we're consistent with the rest of the world around us?
Good question.
I know. That's why I asked it. It's okay if you need a second to think. That's fine. I can share my thoughts while you think if you'd like.
Sure, share your thoughts.
Cool. So first of all, I think that for predators in any way, shape, or form, for churches specifically, they are meant to be, the system is built to elevate one person and to have that person have the trust of people. So if you're someone who does take advantage of people and manipulate, what better way to do that than with a group of people who literally shows up voluntarily to listen to you? So I think that's number one. And I think eventually your sins catch up to you and that gets revealed because you will mess up along the way. Two, in the same way, I think that we idolize leaders and I think we pressure them. And this is not to justify the behavior, the wrong behavior of someone, but we do create an elevated level of expectation around church leaders, and they get so trapped in a corner or feel like they have no way out when they do have a way out. This is not, once again, this is not writing off anything or dismissing anything, but we can make them feel as if they don't have any options to save themselves when things do start to get bad. You know, what may have started as a simple porn addiction for a pastor could turn into something much worse because that pastor never felt like they had or never knew of a way to ask for help with the original addiction. And but there are avenues. We need to educate ourselves. And but I think we idolize leaders, and the leaders buy into that idolization as well. They think they have to live up to that expectation. So I think those are kind of two big things that I think are the reason churches themselves have this issue in a kind of significant way.
I think it also goes even bigger to this great controversy with, I mean, Satan was in a high position, right?
Yeah.
And he was talented, charismatic. You know what I'm saying? Like you can.
Yes.
So there's some similarities. I think it really angers him.
Yeah.
To see those people working for the Lord. So
and he targets.
And when he can get to them, he can also affect not just their family or his kids, but entire communities, and like you said, entire churches, and So I think it's.
Well, just think about the fall. If you have the top of the pecking order, and they fall, that's a, metaphorically, that's a pretty.
It's the dominoes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a domino effect there.
Yeah.
They fall, then the next person will fall too, and it kind of goes with what you were saying, and I would call it the kind of that God complex. Every pastor has that fight, and I'm not immune to it. You certainly are not immune to it. We're not immune to that. There's something about this awesome visionary idea of being a pastor and serving and preaching and speaking for God that turns into I'm speaking for God, and all that kind of stuff. So once you get that, you buy into that mentality, then it's, well, why would you say no to me? There's no need for you to say no to me. Don't you know I speak for God?
Yes.
And that's a whole dark place to be in.
But I also think it's also that we're just a reflection of the general population.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think it's we're
people.
Yeah. And pastors, I'm pastor's daughter. I know how human you all are.
Yes, absolutely.
So
the other thing too, I think, is our churches naturally don't have great systems of accountability. We haven't created that for our pastors very well, our leaders, and we haven't created that for ourselves very well either. I would be willing to bet that the majority of church members don't know who to talk to if someone in their church is caught in something and they need to report. They don't know who they can go to if the pastor is the person that is hurting them or hurting someone else. And they don't know who in the conference to talk to in Adventism, or which elder to talk to, and you don't know how deep the conspiracy runs and if other people know about it, because it is the other thing too is I think the institution, the larger it grows, the greater the need to protect itself, and so the institution as an objective kind of being, if we anthropomorphized it, it would be this thing that is like, I will sacrifice the individual to preserve the institution, and I don't want to shake up the institution. And that has caused a lot of leaders to cover up things they shouldn't have covered up because they just don't, either they don't have the bandwidth to deal with it correctly, they don't have the resources, or they're tired.
Yeah.
And these are all, these are not excuses. These are reality. These are the things that people are saying. This is what happens. So, for someone then who's seeing this happen in front of their eyes and who's watched the pastor that they've known their entire lives, maybe the pastor that baptized them, right? How do I how do I respond to that as a believer, as just a Christian, quotes there? We're all just Christians, including the pastor that failed. But how do I respond to that? Because I feel like that would shake some faiths. So what do you think?
It's interesting that there is a Bible section. There's a section in the Bible that addresses this issue, and I can't take credit for this, but I remember one of my professors talking about leadership and the real possibility of falling. And I never seen this before. I normally quote this a lot when I'm preaching about God's love and his unchanging nature, and it's this verse in Hebrews where it says that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But right before that, he's mentioning about leaders and the possibility that if they fall. And the point he was making is that, yes, every leader has the potential to fall, but Jesus will never change. He never falls in spite of. And it's kind of this call to, we need to make sure that our eyes and our focus is on the person who never changes. It can be that I can fall, Ryan can fall, you can fall, but Jesus never changes. He is always there. He's constant. And when we begin to address that and embrace that as a community, I think when the fall happens, it won't be as drastic or as detrimental. There might be the personal loss, kind of the hurt, but it won't be something that changes your faith because your eyes are still focused on the person that doesn't change.
I think what I'm hearing you saying is this kind of idea of holding your leaders in loose regard. What I think happens is you tend, when that breaks, you realize that you were putting your faith in the leader and not in Jesus, and your faith was dependent on that. And I think you've become pastor centric at that point, or leader centric, and so this idea of keeping your faith where it should be matters. I do think that there is the question that comes up, which is, well, if God is real, why would he allow this person to to take advantage of his people that he supposedly cares about? And I get that question. Like, I understand the reason that question is asked, and I don't always have a good answer for it. But I agree that our focus should not be on the leader. And if a friend lies to me, I don't suddenly doubt God because a friend lied to me. Why am I going to doubt God if I don't want to doubt God if a pastor lies to me. It tells me that my faith wasn't in the God behind the pastor at that point. It was, I just liked what the pastor had to say or what the pastor did for me. And so I think it's a wrong focus there. And it means that, we do hold our leaders to an impossible regard. They will never meet that standard. Yeah. We do it with pastors' kids all the time. We expect them to be more. Yeah, I know. That's like, that's news. It is. We do it to pastors' kids all the time. We hold them to the standard that they'll never meet. Yeah. They basically have to be better than Jesus was as a pastor's kid. Yeah. And that's sad. We don't let every pastor knows this. You want to share a story in a sermon that shows that you're just like your members, but you can't be too transparent, or else you get in trouble. And so every pastor has those safe stories of their time in sin, but it wasn't anything that, anyone would start to doubt or question their leadership. But every pastor has stuff in their past that would make people question their leadership. And we can't, because we can't talk and be authentic as fully as we'd like to, because of this expectation that is both we put on ourselves and people put on us. So it's a cultural thing is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a really big cultural thing. And I think we've got to start with as many of the little things as we possibly can, being as transparent as we can, being as vulnerable as we can as leaders. But, I remember a story when I was a little girl and an elder was getting on to me because I was misbehaving. Shocker. I've misbehaved all the time. And
never change.
It never changes. And my mother overheard him scolding me, and the part that made her really mad was when he said, you have to behave because you're the pastor's daughter. Oof. And my mom stood up and got up in his face and screaming at him, which you can imagine how well that went over. But her words I will never forget, which is, she will not behave because she is a pastor's daughter, but because she is a Steen, and she is my daughter. And she is our daughter, but it has nothing to do with her dad's chosen profession.
Yeah.
And, that, but then they echoed that over and over and over again throughout my life. But we need to, those things need to be said to some elders, you know what I'm saying? And they need to be said to some deacons and to some people. And, but then it's also, but I have to say, this idea that we need to keep our eyes on Jesus, I agree with that 100%, right? That is the, that's, however, that's not an excuse for us Christians to behave badly.
Correct.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. No, correct.
Because we are supposed to be the hands. You know what I'm
fun
saying?
Watching you have this like slightly concerned look on your face for the last 5 minutes, and I've been curious to hear it. Now I know why.
Yeah, but
and
that
I
really bugs me. Like,
Yes.
people will say, when someone says, I was offended by so and so. Well, you shouldn't be looking at them. You just need to look at Jesus.
Yeah.
Give me a break. That doesn't give us license to be rude and nasty and unkind and unloving. So, on the other hand, we have got to keep our eyes on Jesus. I mean, that, and put our trust and faith in him. I mean, since I said we need to get vulnerable, I'll be vulnerable. At one point, when I was working, I was spending a lot of time away from home. I had some moments where I was stressing about my marriage. Now, Chris had never given me any reason to ever worry about anything. I mean, he'd never done a thing. But this world and the devil can get in your brain. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm driving up to Pisgah one day, and I start thinking about him not being faithful. And the next thing I know, he has 7 wives, in my mind, folks.
I get it.
And as I'm driving, I'm just, I start crying out to God, like, what the world? What's going on with me? Why am I in this spiral, right? Of this, horrible thinking. And I finally, came to the conclusion that I can't guarantee that my husband will never, right? Like, I don't know that, right? The devil may I might find out tomorrow he has 7 wives. But if that is to happen, I know that I was supposed to marry him because I prayed about that, and I was really convicted that he was, and then God knew, right? So he's going to walk through this journey with me. God is going to be with me in this process. And I'm putting my trust in God, and I am living my life for God, all of it. And that's where I've got to put my trust and faith. And then if and when anything horrific like that were to happen, then, I'm still just trusting in God, because I can't love anyone fully, and I can't minister to anyone fully or connect with anyone fully if I'm constantly worried about, but what if.
And I think, to add on to what you're saying there too, marrying him, if that was the case, marrying him definitely was in God's will based on, how you interpreted those prayers and those answers to prayer, right? And at some point, he steps out of God's will,
right?
And it's not that God wanted you to get married because you'd have to go through that or anything.
No.
It was someone stepped out of God's will to do this thing,
That's
and
right.
now there are these are the repercussions of free will. And I think the other side of that is, we do tell in agreeing with what you've said with the caution of this idea that we would never tell. Well, we do tell, unfortunately, but I would hope we stop telling because, well, you just need to go home, and we would never tell someone who's being hurt by an abuser, well, you just need to keep your eyes on Jesus. Your husband or your wife is fallible. They'll make mistakes, but you need to continue living with them and trust that Jesus is going to carry you through.
No, don't do
but
that.
we do that with, oh, well, you shouldn't have your eyes on these abusive church members that are hurting you
Right.
and causing you harm and damaging your faith and your livelihood.
That's right.
But just keep your eyes on Jesus, but stick it out with them. That's not right either. So I agree with you. It's not keeping your eyes on Jesus is not a distraction or dismissal of the reality of the fractured situation, but it is. I think faith is not the thing that saves you from the journey. It's the thing that gives you endurance for the journey.
To get through the journey.
Yep.
Exactly.
So
That's right.
it's not a fast forward button, but it's the thing that lets you press play to get through it.
It's not something to dismiss it. It kind of just gives you the anchor during that process, because as you mentioned, there's this element of free will, and we're free radicals. It's just like, what's going to happen at any moment? My wife can choose to walk out, and leave me with a 1-year-old and 4 churches, and what am I going to do? That's her choice. But in the process, it's kind of that story of Jesus in the boat while sleeping with the disciples. Here they feel that they're all by themselves, but he's right there constantly. We can always turn around and know he's right there in the midst of the storm, and he doesn't change. He can bring it, but that will never, there's no room to say, oh, well, you can do whatever you want, choose, live however you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so that no one thinks we're just trash talking spouses here. I don't have a spouse to trash talk. I'm fine. I think the other side of this too is, all things equal, it's also equally likely that you would do it to your wife, or you would do it to your husband. Like it is equally likely. So this isn't a reflection on either of them.
No, please, thank you. I appreciate you clarifying.
I could walk out on my dog tomorrow. My dog could run away from me tomorrow. That's the closest thing I got. I'm sorry. It is. I think walking through the journey and remembering that there's more to this than just the isolated incident in a church, and understanding that people will fail. It's not to dismiss the heinous act that has taken place, but it's understanding that there's a bigger story and a bigger narrative here. And we need to keep that in mind. It gives us perspective. It helps us get away from the fire big enough to see that there's a fire. It's not, there's a whole fire. There's the other end to the fire. We can, and so it does elevate our perspective, and it helps us gain the tools necessary to move forward. And if it does mean that you need to walk away from a relationship, if it means you need to walk away from a church community that has been harmful and the place is so traumatic you can't be there, PTSD is real.
Absolutely, 100%.
I get it. Yeah. Your faith is not defined by your church membership or which building you are in on any given weekend. It is defined by your relationship with Jesus Christ, and that is the thing that needs to be preserved at all costs. Yes. So, and I don't say that lightly.
Well, it's really the same principle. If we're clinging too much to our leaders, then when our leaders fall, we're devastated, right? And even in that process, if we've got to put our focus on clinging to Jesus. Let that be the goal. To continually keep clinging to Him and not.
Yep. And remind yourself of the people in your life that have been positive role models of faith, and don't, there is room for positive role models still.
Yes.
Yeah,
even if the faith or the trust is shaken, to remember the people in your life that have helped you get to where you are is a big thing too. Well, thank you guys for coming on. Any final thoughts, words of encouragement for anyone out there?
Other than just say, I'm sorry. When that happens, it's so incredibly devastating. And I don't want us to, in what we said, to minimize the devastation. Do you know what I'm saying? It hurts. And I praise God that we serve a God who is the great comforter, who's willing to comfort us in this process and through the process. But, it hurts. And so I'm sorry. And find people who can come alongside you during that process of mourning.
I would agree. I think we read the Bible sometimes and think everything just happened back to back to back to back, but it doesn't. Everything happens over a long period of time. I mean, you look at Job, if you read Job just all the way through, you get the impression it just happened 1 minute after the next, but he and his friend sat in 7 days in silence. 7 days, 7 nights in complete silence before anyone said a word, just sitting on the remnant and rubble of his life.
Right.
It's okay to hurt, and it's okay to grieve, and to take the space that you need in order to make that happen and to take care of yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for the perspectives you guys have brought. Joe, any last words from you? You good?
I was just going to say, it might, if the hurt is that deep, it might be time to find a new community. There's nothing wrong with searching, those friends that can.
This
stay
episode
for
of the
70,
Echo Podcast is sponsored by Southern Adventist University.
Thank you guys so much for listening, for being a part of this journey with us. If you are in a situation where you are wrestling because of this very issue, we are sorry that you were ever have to been put into that situation. We're sorry for anything that has happened to you. And we are praying for you. We hope that you can recover from this and journey through this with God, and know that He is by your side. And if you do want to engage with any other content that and any other episodes of Echo or anything else that the Carolina Conference is putting out, go ahead and head on over to theprojectrefresh.org, and you can go check out all of that. So thank you guys so much for journeying with us. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Echo. We hope you enjoyed it. To stay up to date with new episodes as we release them, and for more awesome content from Project Refresh, a ministry of the Carolina Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. And don't forget to like and leave a comment.